Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give just a couple more minutes to allow some others to join the call. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. And as always, welcome to the call. I'm JB Banks, Dean of Students here at CU Boulder. I will be moderating today's call. Just a few quick housekeeping items before we get started. All attendees' lines will be muted throughout the call. When we get to the Q&A, place your question in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to get to all questions. If we do not get to your question, you can reach out to us at colorado.edu/COVID-19 website. And as a reminder, today's call will be recorded. This recording will be added to our COVID-19 website. On today's call, we have joining us Dr. Phil DeStefano, our Chancellor. Welcome, Chancellor. We also have Pat O'Rourke, Interim Chief Operating Officer. We have Russ Moore, our Provost. Dan Jones, Associate Vice Chancellor for Integrity, Safety, and Compliance. Catherine Eggert, Senior Vice Provost for Academic Planning and Assessment. We have Jeff Zayak, Executive Director with Boulder County Public Health. Also joined by Ann Smizing, Executive Vice Provost for Academic Resource Management. Catherine Irwin, Chief HR Officer. Dr. Chris Obina, Boulder County Public Health Medical Officer. Trina Rulin, Boulder County Attorney. Sarah Huntley, Director of Communication and Engagement with the City of Boulder. Now I will turn it over to Pat O'Rourke for some opening comments. Pat?
Morning, everybody. Wanted to welcome you here today in order to be able to join us. We know that you've got lots of questions. We've got lots of areas that we want to update you on today. Those include some updates on the fires that have been affecting the Boulder community, where we are in terms of our COVID situation, and then providing some academic updates. So we hope to be able to anticipate a good number of your questions and to be in a position where we're providing some helpful information to you. But I also wanted to invite the Chancellor, Phil DeStefano, to be able to add his thoughts before we turn to the substance of the conversation.
Thank you, Pat, and I appreciate everyone being on Zoom today for us to answer questions that you have. And I'm already seeing that we're getting a couple questions, which is great. But again, I want to thank you for being here and look forward to today's session. And Pat, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. And so, Dan Jones, would you be willing to start us off with a discussion about the fires that are burning in the areas that are north and west of the campus?
Certainly. So there are two forest fires in Boulder County. First is the Calwood fire, which is burning north of Boulder. It's the larger of the two. It is about 14 to 15 miles north of Boulder. The second fire is the Left Hand Canyon fire, which is burning about 17 miles west of Boulder. Most important, neither of these fires are a threat to campus at this point, and we really do not expect them to be. I want to recognize that the smoke plumes that you or your students have seen are dramatic, and that they can create the impression that the fires are closer than they really are. The Calwood fire has about 250 firefighters working the scene. They're making progress, but it's important to know that it's not burning in the direction that threatens the campus at all. A good deal of the fire is burning away from the campus. The left-hand fire is a smaller fire by comparison. It's about 470 acres when I looked right before getting on this call. And it's further away from the campus than the Calwood fire. Right now, it's not endangering the city of Boulder or the campus. A Type 2 incident management team that was brought in to manage both of the Boulder County fires. This helps ensure resources, such as the many air attacks that's on both fires that you may have seen in the media. Please know that if there were even the remotest possibility of evacuations for impacting the campus, we have plans in place for a variety of different disasters. And part of that, we would notify students what to do, where to go, and we would assist at all levels of that effort. We would inform parents and families as part of that. It's also important to know that we have a very strong relationship with Boulder County Office of Emergency Management. In fact, many of our emergency management staff are helping coordinate with the current fire. I want to mention that I'm immensely grateful for all of the individuals fighting these two fires. This includes all the individuals who are actively on the line, those who are providing support, and many of those in for example, Jeff Sage's area, who are providing guidance regarding COVID, both in terms of how we respond and in terms of the evacuation areas. My thoughts and prayers go out to those who have been impacted by the fires. We do not know of any individuals, any members of the CU community whose homes were destroyed. But we know that there have been individuals who have been impacted by the evacuations. The campus is working to support those individuals. Students who have been impacted are encouraged to contact the Students of Concern team, and employees should contact their supervisor, or they can also work with employee relations. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Jeff Sage for an update on the county's latest announcement.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. What I'm going to do is share a screen, and I'm going to cover some data points with you. I want to talk about where we are as a county. As you know, when I presented to you for the last few weeks, we were concerned about being able to make sure that we stayed in safer at home level 2, which we are continuing to remain in. And I'm hoping somebody can give me share power here. And I'll put up these slides. Let me know when I have it. But I'll keep talking until I get it. But wanted to make you aware of what our data looks like from the state level. Then I also want to show you some data from our 18 to 22-year-olds, specifically talk to you about where we are relative to our public health order levels for gatherings. And then also share with you just some challenges that we're going to have as we move into the fall. And there we go. Thank you. All right. And if BJ or JB or if Pat, somebody can just let me know when you can see that.
You are
Thank
live, Jeff.
Thank you. So this is I'm just showing you one of three state indicators. This is our incidence rate, and it's for our entire county population. So you'll notice this rate is different than what I'm going to show you for our 18 to 22-year-olds. But again, the message here is we're squarely within safer at home level 2. We want to remain there. We are going to have a few challenges as we move into the fall. And again, I'll talk about those in just a second. This is a graph that is really pleasant to see for all of us. I know I showed this to folks last week, and or I think Pat did, but you can see clearly the light blue on the top are our University of Colorado students or affiliates, and the dark blue on the bottom are non-CU affiliates. And we can see that, thank you again to the students that are doing the right thing. This just demonstrates the commitment that's been made by students to keep these numbers low. We are seeing increases in our general population that I'll talk about in a little bit, but this just demonstrates the commitment from the students themselves. This is the 18 to 22-year-old trend in incidence for new COVID for 2 weeks. And you can see that, again, we were at a really high peak, dramatically drove this down. So again, thank you to all the students, all the parents who are supporting the students in this. Because we are making a difference. We are now down to our baseline levels, which is excellent. And as I had reported last week, we were above baseline, but I knew that if we worked hard, we'd be at baseline this week, and we are actually at baseline. So for all three of our metrics, we are at a baseline level. If you look at testing in our entire population, prior to CU starting testing, we were running between 350 and 500 tests per day. The University of Colorado ran over 1,000 tests just the other day. So there's lots of testing occurring, lots of encouragement for off-campus as well as on-campus testing. Our baseline rate now is 239.5 per 100, which is less than the 250. And finally, the percentage of positivity rate among 18 to 22-year-olds is less than 5% at 4.4. So we've made great progress, and we cannot stop the progress now. And I'm going to talk about why as we move forward here a little bit more. This is our overall 5-day average on cases. You can see we're still a bit higher than we were down here, and it's starting to track up. And this is our challenge as we move into the fall. Our hospitalizations, which you can see here for COVID-19 in Boulder County, are continuing to track up. And we are starting to see increased cases across the entire state. So this is the state's caseload, and you can see that we are heading in the wrong direction. So this is really a message to all students and parents that we need to continue to be diligent as we move forward. This is a look at the metro area level. So these are metro counties as well as the rest of the counties across the state. And especially here, what we're starting to see is tracking up of our cases in all age group populations, with exception of our 18 and 22-year-old group, which has come down and is now starting to just go up a little bit. But we need to be diligent because as we move into the fall and we're seeing those increased hospitalizations, that puts a lot of stress on our system. It puts our folks, especially in this age group category here, the 55 and above, to higher risk of serious outcome and impact. We're also learning about anybody who's hospitalized in the process of COVID and impacts they're starting to see from anybody who's been hospitalized at this point. So we know, and we're going to continue to learn more about how COVID impacts us as time goes on. So we can't let up our guard. We've got to continue to focus and be diligent, especially as we move into the fall. So the change in moving from level A to our baseline level is that gatherings can now be a max of 10 people. And that is going to be critical for everybody that's on this call to please help support, please help follow, because as we move, especially towards Halloween and other holidays that are coming up in the fall, we know that it's going to be important to maintain social distancing. And if we don't, we're going to continue to see our numbers climb across the state. We could have other orders that have to go back into place in order to control spread of the disease. So it's really diligent that we're paying attention now to making sure that we're social distancing even when we are gathering in small groups. Maintaining that 6-foot social distancing is critical. The disease can't spread unless people are close enough together, and masking makes a huge difference. So please continue to follow those things. And the last thing I would say is, unfortunately, we are still hearing, I think JB is going to report on some more of this, but unfortunately, we still are seeing some groups of students that are gathering on the Hill, and they're doing it in violation of the orders. We are going to continue to take those things seriously. We are going to pursue enforcement. The University of Colorado, the City of Boulder, and Boulder County Public Health have a close working relationship. We are going to continue to pursue those things. Those are serious. They put our entire community at risk. They put the students that are doing the right thing at risk. And we're going to continue to focus on that because it is critically important. Again, Halloween coming. We really need the students are doing the right thing to continue doing it. And for the students who are not, to really follow the orders that are in place in order to keep our whole community safe. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there, and I'm going to turn it back over to Pat.
So thanks, Jeff. And I just wanted to spend a few minutes following up on some of the things that Jeff talked about. It's really great that we're seeing the number of cases go down in that 18 to 22-year-old population. It's one of the reasons why we were able to go from being at level C 2 weeks ago back down to what the baseline level is, which allows students to be able to have more personal gatherings. It allows us to be able to offer some educational supportive programming at CU. And so we're really pleased with a lot of the trends that we're seeing. So far this semester, we've run close to 39,000 monitoring tests, and we have the capacity to run more than 1,000 of those, significantly more than 1,000 of those every day. We want to keep that testing up within our community. It's a great early warning system for us, but the goal is not to do testing in order to detect cases. The goal is to be able to prevent those cases from occurring altogether. And I'm really happy to be able to report that we're at the point now where we've got almost all of our students out of the isolation rooms that we were using on campus. Only 1% of those rooms are currently in use, and nothing makes us happier than making sure that those beds are available but empty, because we don't have the cases of infection occurring within the community. Keeping those numbers down is vitally important. As students returned to classes last week, we saw really good compliance with them in the classroom environment, on campus, wearing their mask, maintaining distancing, doing all the right things, which is fantastic. And please keep it up, and thank you for doing it. As Jeff talked about, though, we're still seeing some problem addresses on the hills. We're seeing some properties on 19th Street, all located in the block of 10th and 19th, primarily associated with the SAE fraternity that we've had ongoing public health order violations with. And as I discussed last week, there's been some disciplinary actions that have been instituted because of that chapter. It's also important to note that the IFC on the Hill organization, that is the body that works with the non-affiliated fraternities, suspended the SAE chapter, and they're not allowed to engage in any activities, social, philanthropic, recruiting, or otherwise, because of the conduct in which they were engaging. And so I wanted to say thank you to the IFC on the Hill and to the other Greek leaders in the community who are demanding more of their members and making sure that they are engaging in the right type of behaviors that's going to allow the campus to remain safe. We've got a couple of other properties, though, that are continuing to have some orders, and we are going to be addressing those. 1100 Pennsylvania Avenue, which is a Kappa Sigma house, had a party last weekend, and we're in the process of being able to investigate that and take the measures that we need to. as well as the properties that are located at 510 South 44th Street and 1037 12th Street. Right now, we have 13 students who have been suspended for the remainder of the semester, 29 students who have been subject to interim exclusions, and 11 other students whose cases are on interim suspensions. We don't want to take those actions, but we will when students have engaged in conduct that are violative of public health orders and that are creating a significant risk to the community. It's not fair to the thousands of students who are doing what they need to do in order to make sure that the learning environment and the campus community and the broader community is safe, and for us not to be able to take action to be able to address the conduct of a few that are placing us at risk. As Jeff talked about, we're coming into a period of time where there will probably be a temptation to engage in some high-risk behavior. Halloween is one of those days that we're concerned about, but we also know that after a period of time where the public health orders have been more stringent, that relaxing them some may feel like an invitation to say we're out of the woods. But I really want to be clear here. Baseline in terms of the statistics doesn't mean normal. We are still in a situation where COVID is prevalent on the campus and in the community. And if we don't maintain our vigilance now, we face the possibility of having another spike in cases and having to go back to more restricted settings. We know that you don't want that. We know that the parents don't want it. We know that the students don't want it. So please help us. And as part of that, for the on-campus students, keep up your testing as required as being part of the protocol. For the off-campus students, please remember that we have the testing available at the UMC and the SEEK building. We can test 600 people a day, faculty, staff, and students, and we want to use that capacity because it's our best early warning system. If you are sick, please make sure that you stay home and that you don't infect others. And that if you get contacted to participate in contact tracing, follow through, because we want to use all the tools at our disposal in order to make sure that the campus remains safe. So thank you all for what you're doing. Thank you to the parents for supporting your students and for supporting CU. It means a lot. And to the students, we know that you've made tremendous sacrifices. We want to make sure that you are able to continue your educational experiences here this fall and into the future. Kira Bradley and the team in Student Affairs are working to be able to develop some more programming to make the semester enjoyable and create social opportunities. And together we're going to make it through the challenges that we're facing. And so with that, I'd like to shift over to Catherine Eggert, who can talk a little bit about some of the academic experiences that we're experiencing.
Thank you, Pat. So I have some updates on academics for this semester, and I want to start with reiterating something that we covered last week in this call, and that is about our pass-fail grading policy for this academic year, particularly this semester. Now, one thing that students and advisors already know is that we have, starting this semester, we have permanently extended the deadline to declare a class pass-fail. It used to be the end of the third week of the semester. We've extended that to the end of the 10th week, and that will continue. This year, that date is October 30th, so students still have 10 days to decide whether to declare a class pass-fail. Of course, that date is prorated for the few classes we have that have a shorter term than the usual semester. So in a message today to students, faculty, and staff, Provost Moore communicated that we are not otherwise changing our pass-fail grade policy for this semester. And I wanted to just tell you a little bit about the considerations that went into that decision. First thing to know is that we listened to a lot of student and faculty feedback on this. We really understand the stresses that students are under, and we understand as well the considerations that go into grading students from the faculty perspective. So the decision really came down to two key factors. First of all, COVID-19 is a very uncertain situation, as you know. So any decision that we make for this semester, which is, let's call it a COVID semester, would need to continue for further COVID semesters. So spring semester and maybe even beyond. I hope not, but maybe. So as we think about that, if we were to extend the same pass-fail options as we did in the spring, which was basically unlimited pass-fail grades, that could mean that, that many students would have multiple semesters, 3 semesters, maybe even more, with few or no letter grades on their records. This could cause considerable harm to students' transcripts and ultimately to their future plans when they're looking for employment or applying to further their educations past City of Boulder. The other important factor is the many, many reports that we heard from students in spring 2020 that they lost their motivation to learn once they declared a class pass-fail, that they really just went for the pass as the lowest bar. And we think that does a lot of damage to students' self-esteems as well as to their academic records. So I do want to tell you though about the fact that we are taking steps to ease students' stress this semester. We have already urged our teaching faculty and are urging them again to be really attentive to students' teaching needs this semester. We understand that many of our students are finding online or remote learning more difficult than in-person learning. We've asked faculty to take that into consideration, as well as students' particular circumstances, such as, for example, internet access. What we're calling the faculty to do here is to build as much contact with their students as possible. That's the crucial thing, and we will also talk about how that affects students. We have, in addition, we have asked faculty to examine their syllabuses and not to try to compensate for remote learning by piling on extra work than is typical for that course. Finally, we've provided many resources for faculty to improve and sharpen their teaching, especially through the Center for Teaching and Learning. Now, we recognize that this decision is a disappointment to some of our students and perhaps to some parents as well. But again, we're asking you to recognize there was an extensive discussion of this. It was thoughtful. It considered students' needs across a wide front, and we are trying to ensure our students' success through this decision. The second topic after pass-fail is that the question of the plans for the spring 2021 semester. We will have information on the spring 2021 academic calendar and on course instruction modes and other plans for campus operations this week. And this announcement will go out by the end of this week. What will also happen for students' class registrations is that they will get very soon the standard notification from the Office of the Registrar concerning their assigned dates for when they can enroll in classes. The spring schedule of classes will be available on November 2nd, and registration will begin for current degree-seeking students on November 9th. So look for that announcement this week of plans for the spring semester, and students should also look for their registration date. I can't give you more details about the academic calendar today because the plan is still being finalized, but the announcement will be in your hands very soon. Thank you, and now I'll turn things back over to JB.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate that update very much. To all the panelists, as always, I'm glad you're here. Very informative information. I again want to thank our students for taking precaution, wearing masks, following our public health orders. We know that the majority of our students are following recommendations and working to mitigate the spread. Our students are doing fantastic. Turning this thing around, seeing the numbers dip is exactly what we wanted our students to do, but we knew that they could do it. I also want to thank our community partners for working together with us to open up opportunities for students who are taking precautions and working together to address behaviors that are not. Pat mentioned it earlier. We're aware, we know, and we will take action. With the recent changes to the public health order, I'm excited to share that we have additional in-person programming and engagement opportunities for students. Last weekend, our program council hosted 2 in-person movie screenings in one of our largest lecture halls. Friday night was Hocus Pocus and Saturday was Scream. I'm a little afraid of Scream and all those other things, but it does sound exciting. That's why I wore the glasses, just to brighten up the day. They look forward to continuing these events into the coming weeks. Our students can swing by Pumpkin Patch this Friday on the Hill at noon and near the UMC from 6 to 9 p.m. We are working on some other fun opportunities for students to get together with small groups this weekend as well. Since the start of the pandemic and in response to student needs, Health and Wellness Services has been providing programs that support and focus on mental health and holistic well-being. These services include counseling and psychiatric services, medical services, recreation services, peer-to-peer wellness coaching, support groups, advocacy, telehealth appointments, and workshops. The pandemic has changed by way of increasing the modes that we offer services to include virtual formats. We have had and continue to offer 24/7 phone lines for CAPS and the Office of Victim Assistance. And we know that access at any time is important for our students. Now, I would like to open it up for Q&A. If you have a question, please feel free to enter it into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We are prioritizing questions for students and family members. I'll go to my first question. First question is for you, Jeff. Will Boulder County Public Health and CU be considering additional restrictions on 18 to 22-year-olds for Halloween weekend?
We will not. We, as you saw from the data, we're at a base rate, but it's again critical that we have students continue these behaviors that have been positive, restrict the gatherings. We will definitely be looking for folks where there's large gatherings, just as we have been these last couple weeks. So we're not announcing any additional restrictions beyond what we have right now that's already in the public health order. And as I had said earlier, that is 10 people or less in terms of gatherings, and social distancing and masking.
Jeff,
Jeff. Go ahead, Pat.
As a follow-up though, you would be looking at this next Tuesday as well. And if we went back up over those baseline statistics, that could affect the following weekend.
That is correct, Pat. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat and Jeff. This next question is for you, Dan. Have on-campus security and police reduced their presence in dorms? There is a great deal of dialogue on the parents' Facebook site on overzealous presence and behaviors in student dorms. For example, flashlights in windows, banging on dorms very late at night or earlier. Can you look into this?
Certainly would be happy to look into those types of questions. I think it's important to know that enforcement within the residence halls is really based on things such as noise complaints. But if parents have concerns or individual students have specific instances, we would certainly be happy to, we want to know about those, and Chief Jokers can share that with her command staff for follow-up. It's also important to know that all officers and residential service officers do have body-worn cameras. And so we can use that in terms of review for specific cases. And we do pull a selection of those at random for proactive review to ensure just departmental quality assurance, and that everyone is meeting all leadership's expectations.
Thank you, Dan. Jeff, this question is for you, and I think it's a little bit in there for me as well. Jeff, how are BCPH and CU Boulder taking a balanced view of the risk to young people from COVID versus needs for mental health support?
Thanks, JB. And we definitely understand and have been tracking actually indicators that are looking at, are we seeing higher behavioral health visits to the hospital as an example? And we are. There is supports through our call line to folks as well. I know Chana could give us that. But as I've said in the past, over the past several weeks, the decision in order to get the rates under control is not solely mine. We were in a stay-at-home level, and if we didn't bring those back into compliance with the safer at home level 2 rates, which is where we are right now, we could have had to move to closing businesses, and it would have had serious significant impacts from a behavioral health, a physical health, an economic, and a social perspective on our entire population. So we're required to take actions that get us back. And that's what's happening with those counties around us right now. I saw there was a question about Adams and some of the others. They are now having to do that same thing because they're in that same position.
And for CU, our health and wellness services, we offer a variety of services and programs that support students, including counseling, psychiatric services, medical services, recreational services, peer-to-peer wellness and coaching, support groups, advocacy, telehealth appointments. We have really increased our involvement, our outreach to students. We're certainly thankful for Dr. McDuffie and her leadership and the teams that she supports, because this effort has been really important in assisting our students. If students need a resource, they can go to colorado.edu/health. Again, colorado.edu/health. This next question.
Hey, JB.
I'm sorry, Pat, go ahead.
Just one other thing to follow up on the question, which is that with the return to baseline that Jeff talked about earlier, the 18 to 22-year-old CU student population is now in the same category of restrictions as the Boulder community generally. And so this will continue to limit some of their social activities, but it's been through the hard work of the student population that we've been able to increase those experiences. And thanks to you, JB, and the folks at Student Affairs, we want to continue to work to be able to create those safe social interactions so that we don't see the spike, making sure that we're providing those mental health outlets and opportunities beyond just the professional counseling. We know it's been a hard semester. So we want to work to support both through the formal mental health structures and by creating those opportunities for them to get the respite that they need and to be able to enjoy the experiences that they have in a safe manner.
Thank you, Pat, for that. This question is for Dan. Dan, will the new social gathering regulations, when finalized, permit large gatherings on campus? For example, will football games and big conference events be hosted?
So large events, we're still not in a place where large events can be allowed. What I can say is that as this is being finalized, initially we'll likely for the campus take a more cautious approach, and then increase up over time to where the state is for large gatherings. Looks like Pat also has a comment specifically. If you want to go ahead, Pat.
To follow up on what Dan was saying, which is that the Pac-12 has indicated that it would allow athletic competition to return in November, and that's when the first football game would be scheduled. We do not anticipate having a stadium experience that would anything be close to an ordinary football experience where there's over 50,000 people in attendance. Under the Pac-12 guidelines, there would be the ability for the family members of some of the student athletes to attend. We will be communicating with Boulder County Public Health about those attendance, recognizing that those decisions are entirely the county's, but we would not be having a general type of fan admission experience for football or other athletic events for the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Pat. This question is for Dan and or Jeff. Can you share if how many 18 to 25-year-olds have been hospitalized from COVID-19 to date?
I can take that. And Chana, please correct me if I'm not wrong. Last week, and I believe it's the same as this week, we've had 1 student hospitalized for COVID-19.
We've had 15 since the beginning of the pandemic, but 1 in this last semester.
Thank you. This question is for you again, Jeff. The red counties in Mr. Zayek's map were Adams and others in Northeast Colorado. Is there any evidence that those numbers are driven by CU students?
Thanks, JB. And at this point, no, there's not. What we know from the state's briefing on this that we've had over the last couple of weeks now is that the majority of the increases that we're seeing across the state that I showed you in that graph earlier are coming from relaxed social distancing, whether it's in businesses or whether it's in personal gatherings. It's relaxed social distancing where people either aren't wearing masks or they're getting together in larger groups. And that is what's driving most of the spread. So again, the message here that I'll just say again, maintain 6 feet social distancing, follow the gathering orders, wear masks.
Thank you, Jeff. This question is for me. Do the new event guidelines give any hope that intramural sports will resume? Our intramural sports teams are evaluating guidelines, as we've been talking about earlier, and what it means for each individual sport. For example, tennis may be possible while sports with more close physical contact are not. While they look different, we did have intramural sports this fall, including esports, soccer shootouts, and basketball horse competitions, and basketball horse competitions. Okay. This next question is for Dan. Is CU testing students have already had COVID? Is CU testing students who have already had COVID?
No, we are, the current guidelines that we're following is, if someone has tested positive within the last 90 days, it doesn't make sense. They'll still show up through some of the tests, so it doesn't make sense to continue to test them over that 90 days. If individuals do receive a notification about a test requirement, and they've already had COVID, they can contact medical services, and we will work to update our records.
Thank you. Jeff, this question is for you. Will Halloween be advertised as a canceled holiday, especially since Pearl Street is a popular Halloween gathering?
And I will answer it from my perspective, and then I know Sarah Huntley's on here, and the City of Boulder has some control over that. But we would not be from a public health standpoint. At this point, we have published Halloween guidelines. They're on our website, they're on the state's website, that talks about how you can conduct Halloween safely. And I'll turn over to Sarah to see if Sarah has anything else to add.
Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Huntley. I'm the Director of Communication and Engagement for the City of Boulder. We are keeping an eye on Halloween plans. We absolutely want people to be able to celebrate, but we want them to do so safely. We put out some tips and tricks, particularly geared towards our younger residents, but we do know that CU, our partners, are planning lots of events and activities, as you heard from JB, for older folks who may want to participate in Halloween festivities. We are definitely discouraging large gatherings. We do not want people gathering on the mall. The Munchkin Masquerade, which is an annual tradition, is doing something completely different this year. So we encourage people to celebrate, but to celebrate safely. We will have increased police presence in and around the Hill, as well as other parts of town as needed. We will have the same number of officers working the whole Halloween weekend that typically work the beginning of back to school, just to make sure that everybody understands what's expected of them. Thanks for the chance to elaborate.
And I will also say as well for Halloween, we are planning a host of events. We've had a committee of individuals, fantastic professionals at CU, working on this over the last week and a half or so, really looking at developing programs and services for our students to be involved in. We want a lot of activity. We want a lot of action. I've decided to also wear a costume. I know it looks like I'm wearing one today with these glasses, but don't hold that against me. But we are doing all that we can to try to make sure that students have exactly what they need in order to be engaged during that time. We recognize that it is a celebrated time. It has a history on our campus, but we're doing everything that we can to engage students to have a lot of fun during that time. Okay. This is a two-part question for me. Will food services on campus expand their options as restrictions continue to be lifted? Are there plans to open inside seating at any of the food facilities for groups up to 10 who may want to dine together? This question is something that we've been talking about earlier, and I think what's important is that we continue to evaluate where we are. And as we evaluate the circumstances, and as we work with our partners with Jeff and some of the other partners in the town, they will allow us to have a little bit more direction as we look to open more extensively. Right now, we're looking at small groups who are gathering for lunch outside, and we want to just try to be safe. We want to be as safe as possible. So we will continue to work with our partners and work with the science as we move forward. This question is for Catherine, a two-part question. When will CU announce plans for spring 2021? And will the spring plans include information about COVID testing for students returning to campus and the dorms?
We'll have an announcement on the spring plans, for spring semester by the end of this week. That will include the academic calendar. And I'm going to toss it over to Dan Jones to talk about when we'll know anything about plans for testing for the spring semester?
So there were the group working on the testing is will folding in with the rest of the planning. In general, it will look similar in that we are anticipating having testing as part of move-in to the residence halls, and then we will continue to have an ongoing testing program, as well as incentives to encourage students to continue to participate in that.
Thank you, Dan and Catherine. And this question is for both you and I, Dan. Will the rec center be able to be open for students wanting to work out without appointments but maintaining social distancing? And go ahead, Dan, and I can jump in as well.
No, go ahead and jump in. I think within limits it's allowed, but go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to Dan's points, within limits is what we're looking at. We're looking to make sure that we are appointment-based at the moment. Reservations right now is required. Of course, we will continue that and monitor it accordingly. Again, as we look at our PHO orders and such, we will be evaluating and moving accordingly. Dan, did you have anything else to add?
No, sir.
Okay, this next question is for Dan and Jeff. Any plans to do more systematic surveillance monitoring of off-campus students, similar to required testing of on-campus students?
So I'll jump in on that. So today, as Pat had mentioned earlier, we have opened up the UMC and SEEK sites to accommodate testing. And then also for off-campus congregate housing, that is part of the plans that those groups need to develop and submit those to Boulder County Health.
Jeff, did you want to add anything to that?
I don't have anything to add except for that we're continuing to obviously encourage all off-campus students to get tested as well, and that's going to help us assure we can control the spread of the disease.
Thank you, Jeff. Dan, can Folsom Field and Farron Field be set up with distancing circles for the groups of up to 10 to be able to be together and still be distanced from other groups so that the police won't crack down on them for being too close?
So that is so certainly if folks are in groups of 10, I'm sorry, someone's trying to call me right now. So certainly if folks are following the orders as have been described, the police would not be writing citations or giving warnings. In terms of the specific ideas, I know that those are many of the types of things that the campus is looking at in terms of how do we create more opportunities for student engagement.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. These are the kinds of ideas that our student engagement groups are looking at. So certainly we will be evaluating this and moving accordingly. Dan, while I still have you on, does CU have plans to host socially distanced tailgating or outdoor big screen viewing of football games?
I am not aware of any types of plans along those lines today.
And I can be more definitive, which is as a social activity, we might be able to consider projecting, but we will not be hosting any form of tailgating related to football games. That would be a prime opportunity for people to mix groups freely. And that's exactly the type of thing that could lead to spread of COVID in the community. So there will not be tailgating.
Thank you, Pat. And one more for you, Dan. Will any food services on campus be open to faculty and staff?
Actually, that's a question I'm don't think I have the answer to. But I think presently that's not the case, and I don't believe we have any plans to try to expand that, not at this time.
Yeah, at this time, there's no discussions going on for that to occur. This question is for Jeff, Dan, and/or Pat. How many off-campus students have been tested to date, numbers or as a proportion?
I'll boot that over to the university.
And I would have to go back and check, JB. I think that currently our off-campus student testing is probably less than 10% of our total testing, but I don't have an exact number on that, and I wouldn't want to quote it and be wrong. I'll see if I can find something by the time we come off the webinar.
Thank you, Pat. And this one is for Pat. Pat, is CU Boulder going to provide a tuition stipend rebate?
So I'd actually like to ask Carla Hoa to weigh in on tuition if she'd be willing to do so.
Thanks, Pat. I'd be happy to weigh in on that. And I just want to say, we know that these are challenging times and that everyone is facing some unique financial pressures associated with COVID. So we've also made some relatively significant investments to support a safe academic experience, and that continues to be our priority. This year really is looking and feeling different for everybody, and yet our instructional costs are not decreasing with remote or hybrid learning, and I know that has been a concern that has come up. In fact, that cost of instruction has increased. So we've implemented several actions to really support the financial costs of our students. So that includes a third year of tuition freezes. And we've also maintained our commitment to the 4-year tuition guarantee, and also have provided over $13 million of CARES Act funding, donor funds, and CU Foundation funds to really help our students in any emergency financial aid that they may require.
Thank you, Carla, for that. This last question is for Dan. Follow up on the stadium question. Can this be opened up during the day for students to exercise and or use as a classroom space?
I know that the stadium was looked at in terms of classroom spaces, and it wasn't feasible at the time. I will need to follow up with athletics in terms of whether we could make that available, but I don't believe that's possible today.
Thank you, Dan. I would like to conclude today's session. Thank all of you for the call. We certainly appreciate you taking the time. If you have further questions, please visit colorado.edu/COVID-19. We provide twice a week updates, 10 a.m. Thursdays with the city and county, and Tuesdays at noon. You can also give us feedback by visiting our COVID-19 website at www.colorado.edu/COVID-19. As always, thank you for joining. Go Buffs.